why should we even use Scrum when there are so many other agile frameworks available in the market? Scrum seems to be too simple for the complex business process at our company. Senior executives don't really care about Scrum. Scrum is just like a toy. Just look at Scrum Guide. It's only 13 pages long. How can you manage a company with a simple framework like that? So in today's episode of the Think and Act Like a Scrum Master video podcast, folks, I will discuss the 4 reasons why Scrum is interesting for people at senior executives level. If you want to know what are the reasons why Scrum might be interesting for the senior executives people, stick around because I will be back right after this one.
What's happening, awesome Scrum Masters? Are you ready for another food for thought to improve your Scrum mastery? The journey towards becoming a Scrum Master is challenging but rewarding. Today's podcast is brought to you by a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer and a coactive coach with over 15 years experience inspiring and enabling aspiring Scrum Masters like you. So buckle up and get ready. From Brisbane, Australia, here's your host, Joshua Partogi.
Hello, what's going on, awesome Scrum Masters? Hopefully you are having an awesome week. Hopefully your developers, your product owner, and other people in your company value the services you deliver to them to help them become more effective in doing their work. As for me, I'm doing quite well, folks. Yes, it has been a busy period since it's the end of the year, but all in all, I'm doing well, I'm staying safe and healthy, and I hope you do also. So folks, if you're watching today's video podcast episode on YouTube, I would like to let you know that today's episode is also available as an audio-only version on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts. And if you're watching today's episode on YouTube, I would like to let you know also that I have placed chapter markers, so that's easier for you to come back to the topics discussed in this episode. Just hover the video player to see the chapter markers. We are now on episode 18 for the Think and Act Like a Scrum Master podcast, folks. And the date today is October 24th, 2022. In the previous episode, I have talked about whether your company actually needs a Scrum Master or an Agile coach to be agile. Well, in today's episode, I kind of want to continue the discussion and talk about the reasons or why your senior executives may want to consider using Scrum in the company. In my case, whether I'm in a position as a Scrum Master working in an organization who hired me, or as a Scrum trainer teaching classes, oftentimes I will get this kind of question from people. And from this question, oftentimes I will get a follow-up challenge from the individual where that individual will tell me, well, there are quite many agile frameworks out there in the market, but why do their company specifically need to use Scrum? Now, in this podcast episode, folks, I will try not to give you reasons from academic perspective or even sales and marketing perspective, but rather from a values and principles perspective. From my personal experience, some of the best companies that I have worked with use Scrum because the leader's personal principles match with the values and principles that are emphasized by Scrum. And oftentimes in this kind of scenario, Scrum just becomes something natural in the company, and the leaders in the company won't try to make Scrum overly complex. So folks, in today's video podcast episode, I'll be sharing you 4 reasons why your senior executives may want to consider Scrum to be used at your company. And throughout today's video podcast episode, I'll be sharing it to you as if I'm talking to a senior executive in a company. So folks, from my personal experience and observation, in general, senior executives don't really care about Scrum or the capital A Agile mechanics, but they care about making their company better in all aspects, starting from getting better employee engagement, to more effective processes, to higher quality products and services, to higher level customer satisfaction, and even up to becoming more competitive in the market and getting more optimum business values like revenue, profit, return on investment, etc. Now, how I often explain Scrum to senior executives is explaining it in the language they care about. So I often tell them that Scrum is just an empirical way of working or a framework. And to be more specific, a way of working to deliver products and services that will be valuable to the customers. As a way of working, Scrum defines minimum sets of elements, it also has values and principles. And in today's video podcast episode, we want to emphasize those values and principles. These elements and also the values and principles that encapsulates the elements should help the company becoming more nimble in delivering values to the customer. Now, we shouldn't use Scrum because it's a trend or because it's currently popular in the job market. We must start with the belief that there is a better way of working in today's digital era than whatever we're currently doing right now. Alright folks, without further ado, let's start with those 4 reasons, and here we go. So let's start with the first reason. If as a senior executive, you believe in transparency, empiricism, or making decisions based on the current reality, or validating assumptions in small steps as a way to manage risk in running the business, Scrum might be already natural for you and something you want to consider using even more in the company. If you dislike seeing people covering up data and information just to make the senior leaders in the company happy, and you dislike decisions made solely based on political power and unvalidated assumptions, as a senior executive, you might find Scrum interesting because Scrum is all about transparency and data-driven decision-making. If we look at the current economic situation around us, I personally think it's too risky to make big commitments up front these days because the situations in the market just change so rapidly. One factor can affect another factor and affect another factor and so on, and it creates multiple ripple effects in the market. And this ripple effects just makes all of the situations become so unpredictable and so hard to comprehend. 2 years ago, we experienced the pandemic, and now every time I watch the news, I will see news or information about the global recession. Now, I'm not an economy expert, but it seems it won't be pleasant. Well, in fact, I personally think once we get through this global recession, which we don't really know when, we won't know what's going to happen then in the future. So the situation might be so much different than today. Now, Scrum is a simple framework that enables us in the company to manage the risk in the midst of unpredictability because Scrum encourages us to deliver our products or services incrementally. And we are forced to make decisions based on the empirical data generated by the delivered product increment. This is what empiricism that Scrum emphasizes is all about. Scrum does not encourage big commitments based on unvalidated assumptions or based on highest political power solely. Scrum encourages us to make small commitments so that we're more nimble in the market. The sprint in Scrum is where you, as senior executives, get to manage or mitigate risk from these uncertainties. The sprint is not a mini waterfall where the Scrum team needs to complete all of the work that has been pushed down to them. A sprint is a container where the Scrum team self-manage in delivering a small increment of the product that should be at a usable state. So that's the key point. Every sprint, there should be a usable product increment. And the sprint itself should not exceed 1 month. And there's a reason for those 2 points. By having a usable product increment in 30 days or less, as leaders in the company, we're able to make decisions and mitigate risk earlier. Now, in today's turbulent, uncertain market condition, I personally think that misforecasts will likely happen. I think it's the norm. Our business will miss the target. But knowing that is the norm, we as leaders need to play the game differently and mitigate risk from these uncertainties in smaller portion. When we have a usable product increment in 30 days or less, our risk from uncertainties in the future will be smaller. We can pivot earlier based on the data and the information we see right in front of us, and yet we still get our money's worth. When we don't have anything usable within that 30 days business cycle, our risk as a business leader becomes higher because we have spent money for that time frame, but we're not getting anything out of the money spent. Or our competitors might already have delivered something to the market, and yet we haven't got anything that we can deliver to respond to our competitors. This might put you in a situation where you'll be missing opportunities in the market. Now, if the information that we have right in front of us tells us that we don't have a team who has the capability in delivering a usable product increment within 30 days or less, we, as leaders, should make decisions to change the situation for the better future. Perhaps we should spend money to leverage the Scrum team members' capability in product delivery, or perhaps we should remove bureaucracies in the product delivery processes. Perhaps it is those bureaucracy that is impeding the Scrum team to deliver a usable product increment within 30 days or less. As leaders, you're the one who can remove those bureaucratic processes that are impeding the Scrum team to deliver. Scrum is all about transparency. It's one of the 3 pillars of empiricism. Empiricism is about making decisions based on that transparent data. If we don't do something about it, if we only see this information as entertainment purposes only, we will end up in a status quo and we might not get agility in the company. So, the first reason why Scrum might be interesting or enticing for you, the senior executives, is because Scrum emphasizes transparency, empirical decision making over unvalidated assumptions and political power. If you believe that's how your business should be run, then Scrum might be something you want to consider. Alright, folks, let's move on to the second reason. If you believe that people should be empowered to make more decisions, and you don't believe in having more layers of managers to control people, then Scrum might be interesting for you. If you believe in self-management or enabling your people to make the strategic decisions needed to make the products and services more valuable to your customers, then Scrum might be interesting for you. If you believe that enabling people to self-manage will make them more engaged with the work that they do and will improve the quality of the product, then I think Scrum might be interesting for you. If your leadership style is leading by serving rather than leading by telling using authority, Scrum will be a natural fit for you because Scrum emphasizes leading by serving, and in Scrum, the person who is portrayed as the leader who serves is called the Scrum Master. But if you don't believe in leading by serving, and you don't believe in giving more authority to your people to self-manage, then I suggest don't use Scrum. Because I personally think without leaders who serve and without self-management, Scrum will just become a micromanagement tool, as I have seen multiple times. Now, Scrum highly emphasizes self-management because Scrum believes that smart, intelligent people should be empowered rather than managed. I would say self-management is the core of Scrum. It is what makes Scrum different to other methods out there. I have seen how many companies only do the Scrum mechanics, but the Scrum teams are not empowered to self-manage. And at the end, people are just moving in motion. And what happens in the company is more like a zombie Scrum. There's no soul in it. There's no spirit. And zombie Scrum happens because the leaders in the company do not believe in distributing the control to the Scrum team. The leaders in the company still want to preserve controls. And in fact, the high-level management prefers having layers and layers and layers of managers to control the Scrum team. This is quite contradictory to lean thinking that Scrum emphasizes. Now, if you don't believe me, just look at frameworks like SAFe that add layers and layers of managers on top of the Scrum teams. Frameworks like SAFe are enticing to leaders who still want to preserve control and have excessive layers of managers in the company. I don't want to bash SAFe, but I want to make it more explicit for you so that you know the contrast in the values and principles that Scrum emphasizes compared to what SAFe emphasizes. SAFe actually diluted Scrum and the whole Scrum team itself. Scrum wants to empower and level up every individual in the Scrum team, but SAFe just makes the Scrum team as the weakest link and puts more layers above the Scrum team. In fact, interestingly, when you look at it, the product owner in SAFe is not really the owner of the product because there are multiple of layers of people above the product owner who push down the decisions for the product owner. In fact, right above the product owner, there's a product manager who manages the person who is supposed to have the ownership of the product. It's quite like an oxymoron, but that's what SAFe just did. So going back to our point about empowerment and self-management, If you believe that your people should be empowered to do the right thing for improving the value of the product, and you believe in removing bureaucracies out of their way so they can deliver the best product for the customers, Scrum will be aligned with your principles. Scrum might be something you want to try out in the company. Alright, so that is the second reason why Scrum might be enticing for you. Alright folks, now let's carry on with the third reason why you as senior executives may want to consider Scrum in the company. If you believe in technical excellence, and if you want people in the company to be proud of the product they're developing, then Scrum is something you may want to consider. Now, to make my point here, I would like to use an example from the case of Boeing. If you have already watched a documentary movie about Boeing, which was available on Netflix, I think a few months ago, it was titled The Fall of Boeing. Now, if you haven't watched that documentary movie, folks, I suggest you find it and watch it. It's really informational. Like, I captured a lot of interesting information from that documentary movie. Now, there is a part in that movie that I found really interesting. The part about how some of the old-time employees complained how Boeing became a sales-driven company after it got acquired by McDonnell Douglas. Boeing started as an engineering-driven company where the engineers have pride with technical excellence, and the engineers will not let anyone ship any planes out if it does not meet the high quality standards that the engineers have defined. But interestingly, the company culture somehow changed, not like revolutionary, but gradually changed after Boeing got acquired by McDonnell Douglas. So after it got acquired by McDonnell Douglas, Boeing shifted its focus on shareholder value and tried to push more sales, but somehow just kind of neglected quality and technical excellence that has already been part of the company culture for decades. And interestingly, in that movie, it was mentioned that the CEO of the company is partly responsible for the downfall at Boeing. A lot of companies face downfall because they don't value technical excellence. Now, Boeing is not the only company who faced this kind of situation. Now, Volkswagen is another company who experienced a similar situation, even though it did not cause loss of lives like at Boeing. In the case of Volkswagen, the CEO, interestingly, was partly involved also. I have met many leaders in a company, like at Boeing and Volkswagen, who think technical excellence slows them down to get into the market or makes the company miss the deadline. I personally think that high quality over deadlines is something that should be emphasized even more in today's digital era. Mark Anderson, the co-founder of Netscape, wrote a very interesting article about how software is eating the world. It's a really interesting article. I personally think that you should check it out if you haven't already, and read that article. If our company still views software as a second-class citizen, or if we still view software as a cost center in the business, I personally think it would be really hard for our business to be competitive in today's digital-driven market, because there are so many companies who put digital first are eating up traditional companies. Just like what Mark Anderson said, many of these digital-first companies thrive because they value technical excellence. So in the first point, I mentioned how in Scrum, there should be a releasable, usable product increment every sprint or within 30 days or less, because that will help us mitigate risk. Now, to add my point on top of that, this usable product increment not only should be usable, but must also develop with technical excellence. Now, there is a common misperception out there on the internet sphere, well, mainly from engineers, who think that Scrum does not care about technical excellence and only values more functionalities or higher velocity every sprint. Technical excellence has always been emphasized in Scrum. Scrum has never been about velocity-driven or output-driven. If we as leaders value technical excellence and we think it should be at the forefront in our company, Scrum might be something you want to consider. And if your people do not yet have the capability to deliver a usable product increment within 30 days or less with technical excellence encapsulated, then you need to put more investment towards leveling up their capability if you care about being more competitive in the market in the future. In Scrum, the team is encouraged and in fact empowered to deliver the highest quality product, even though that might cost the company in getting less amount of product backlog items delivered every sprint. Scrum prefers the team to deliver the product at a sustainable pace as long as it leads to higher quality products. In fact, in Scrum, the management should respect the developer's decisions to maintain high quality in the product. We don't want our company to end up like Boeing or Volkswagen, who neglected technical excellence but then at the end cost them much more than they should. Now, the activities that the Scrum team need to follow to ensure those technical excellence is in place can be seen in their definition of done. And this definition of done should be made transparent to everyone in the company so everyone knows what it takes to develop high-quality products. I have found many companies who said that they're using Scrum, but when I look at the definition of done, it does not reflect technical excellence. We should not just be glossing over Scrum at our company. There's no point just doing Scrum mechanics, but we don't have the definition of done that reflects technical excellence. Because doing so may have us becoming humiliated in the market in the future. When a customer finds out that your product is low quality, your customer might lose trust in your brand and in your product. So it is better to deliver at a sustainable pace with higher quality if we want to be sustainable in the long run. So the third reason, if you value technical excellence and you believe that delivering high quality products with technical excellence will lead to a sustainable company, Scrum might be a good fit for your company because Scrum emphasizes quality and technical excellence. Alright folks, let's move on to the fourth and last reason. So we have discussed how Scrum emphasizes delivery of high quality products. If you have experienced how using on time, on scope, and on budget as the success criteria of the product delivery did not lead to a product that is high quality and highly valuable for the customer, and now you want to use other success criteria, you want to use customer value instead of that project triangle as the success indicator of the product delivery, then Scrum might be something you have been looking for. Because in Scrum, unlike in traditional project management, the success indicator is not being on time, being on scope, and being on budget, but it's customer value and business value. Yes, I agree. It is true that you can deliver customer value and at the same time deliver the product on time, on scope, and on budget. But on the other hand, delivering a product that is on time, on scope, and on budget does not necessarily guarantee the product will generate business value, and it does not guarantee the product will be valuable to the customers. If we look at the market landscape, there are quite many products that failed even though they were delivered on time, on scope, and on budget. If you also want people in the company to be aligned on goals that are value-driven, then Scrum is something that you may want to look at. But if you believe that employees' productivity equals delivering more work items that have been pushed from the higher authority, Scrum might not be for you, because viewing Scrum as a method to get people to deliver twice the work at half the time usually ends up with a feature factory, and it's not really pretty. Using Scrum with this view usually ends up with employee disengagement. I have been into many companies where there isn't any alignment on value-driven goals in the company. Every department in the company is focused on achieving their key performance indicators that are output-driven. And quite often, these KPIs are conflicting with one another. The designer's KPIs is to deliver as many design wireframes as possible, while the engineer's KPI is to deliver as many functionalities as possible, and the tester's KPI is to find as many defects as possible. And oftentimes, these three parties just toss over work at one another, or sometimes they are so defensive to ensure their KPIs look good. There are quite many other examples where these output-driven KPI are conflicting between each department, and that conflicting KPIs has often made the line managers in conflict with one another because they are defending their department's KPI. Because they don't want to be blamed at the end of the year as a low-performing department that caused the company to underperform in the market. No, they don't want to be blamed. I have to emphasize once again that Scrum is for product development. It's a framework for developing complex or innovative products. Scrum is not for construction projects or manufacturing contexts. That would be a different story. Unlike in the manufacturing context, in product development context, especially digital products, more outputs or more features or more functionalities in the product does not necessarily equate to more value. Because Scrum is for product development, the goal is value-driven or outcome-driven rather than output-driven. And Scrum has two goals as the commitments of the Scrum team. Scrum is a goal-driven framework. First, there is the product goal, and then second, every sprint, there is a sprint goal. But the product goal and the sprint goal is never about the amount of work or the velocity that the Scrum team needs to complete. It's about the value that the Scrum team delivers to the business and also to the customers. Scrum encourages the Scrum team to be entrepreneurial in maximizing the value of the product. In most circumstances, value from a business perspective is revenue or return on investment or even profit. Using Scrum does not guarantee the Scrum team will deliver more work items, but using Scrum should enable the Scrum team to deliver functionalities in the product that will be highly used by the customer. And this is what effectiveness is all about. Scrum is not about efficiency. Scrum is about effectiveness. When the developers see their hard work is being highly used by the customers or impacting the customers in a significant way, quite often I've found it will lead to job satisfaction. When you read the Scrum Guide, the outcome or the value the Scrum team delivered is discussed or reviewed during the sprint review. Sprint review is not about checklisting the work completed from Jira. No, it's about inspecting the outcome or the value that the Scrum team delivered in that sprint. When the company focuses on value, from what I have seen, people from multiple departments will naturally come to work together and the silos will gradually be diminished. And cross-functional organization will emerge in the company. Scrum emphasizes cross-functionality because cross-functional teams or cross-functional organization have less waiting time because they have all of the knowledge needed to make decisions. If you still prefer using on time, on scope, on budget as a success indicator of the product delivery, then I would bluntly say that Scrum might not be a good fit for you. If your motivator to use Scrum is to get the team to deliver more outputs or to increase their velocity, then Scrum might not be a good fit for you. But if you believe that the success indicator of the product delivery should be value delivered to your customers and to the business, Scrum might be aligned with your current principle, and Scrum might be a natural fit for your company. If you believe in alignment on value-driven goals, you don't believe in output-driven KPIs, and if you believe people from cross departments should be collaborating towards these value-driven goals, then Scrum might be something you want to consider using at your company. So that is the last and the fourth reason why Scrum might be enticing or interesting for you from values and principles perspective. So to wrap today's video podcast episode, folks, the first reason is about transparency, empiricism, or data-driven decision making over political power decision making. The second reason is about empowerment, self-management, and leadership by serving. The third reason is about pride with technical excellence, with craftsmanship, and high quality products. And the last reason is about alignment, using value-driven or outcome-driven goals. As you can see, Scrum is not really a rocket science, even though there are so many institutions out there that make Scrum overly complicated. If you prefer simplicity over complexity, Scrum might be something you want to consider doing at your company. Now, as you have heard me explain these 4 reasons, some of you as leaders might already have these as personal principles. If so, then Scrum might come naturally fit for you. So I think those are the 4 reasons why Scrum might be interesting for you as a leader at executive level in your company. If the 4 reasons I have mentioned resonate with you, try Scrum out. It's low risk. Try out for 1 sprint, see how it goes, inspect and adapt from those trials. If you like it, continue inspecting and adapting until you have reached your goals, whatever your goals might be. Alright, that is all for today's video podcast episode, folks. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you gained something out of it. Hopefully you are inspired. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel and also to the audio-only podcast of the Think and Act Like a Scrum Master, either on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Apple Podcasts, if you haven't already. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. See you on my next video podcast episode or on my regular videos on the Scrum Master in Black channel. Until next time, be curious, be resilient, challenge the status quo, and lead by serving others in your company. Bye now.